In order to really do that effectively, you have to have a portfolio. And when you start, you don't have a portfolio. So that was the kind of the biggest barrier to entry. But it took me, I don't know, a year, maybe 2 years before I was able to even really get the client base enough to really get the type of clients.
Hey, welcome listeners. This is Chirag Khanijo, your host, co-founder of Flywheeler, and we are on CXO Spotlight. CXO Spotlight brings together the most exciting tech and B2B companies to share their real stories. Today, we have a fascinating leader with us, Juan Grant, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Quantum IDG Group, based out of Houston, Texas. Welcome, Juan. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. So, Juan, let's get into this. You're playing the role of Chief Marketing Officer for Quantum IDG since in 2005. And it's a very strategic role, involves a lot of thought process and also pivoting at several points. So can you tell us about your brand and role and more importantly about how you got here?
Yeah, definitely. I started Quantum. Basically, I was working for a state institution in their marketing department, and they paid a consulting company $50,000 for their new logo. And I thought to myself, man, I could do that. And I think that as the germ is basically what gave me the inspiration deep down. In my current capacity, we are a performance branding and growth marketing agency, which means that it's just simply we're about performance. And the performance is the analytics, the data behind it in terms of how marketing is being approached now in the market, especially in terms of AI.
I think very interesting that you're working for a state agency in your marketing capacity in the early days. And then you identified that as an opportunity, thinking that this is something that you could do on your own, right? But that is not easy. The early stage of starting something new is fraught with fascination in the early days and then a lot of scare. So tell us some of the early stage challenges, because a lot of our listeners are early stage startups in seed stage, Series A, Series B, and some of the tech companies, and they often start with a great idea, right? And then the reality hits in terms of financial aspect of it, as well as product market fit and how to get your first few clients. So I'm sure you have some battle scars. Would love to know some of your early.
Yeah, so I do have a lot of battle scars. I would say that much of the journey was obviously fraught with challenges and obstacles for just a lot of different reasons, mainly for what you just said, for marketing in particular, because we were doing branding, graphic design, just the creative services. In order to really do that effectively, you have to have a portfolio. And when you start, you don't have a portfolio. So that was the kind of the biggest barrier to entry. But it took me, I don't know, a year, maybe 2 years before I was able to even really get the client base enough to really get the type of clients that to even kind of your base level clients, if you will.
I think you're in a unique position because when the startup is in their early stage or a company's in their early days, it's incredibly important to get those first 5, 10 clients who can help you build that confidence and revenue that you have hit product market fit. And marketing is one of the most critical function in that outreach, reach, and visibility. Being a marketer yourself, I'm sure that would have helped. Is there anything that you can tell to a lot of co-founders and a lot of people early in their journey who may necessarily not have marketing background, right? That what are some of the things that they can do in the early days that can help them get those first 5, 10 clients, right? And we have been at it for less than 12 minutes. But I would still say that let's take marketing and performance marketing and growth marketing, your own niche that you work in, and you help some early stage, mid stage, and even large Fortune 1000 companies in their marketing, right? So what's your boldest prediction for where the marketing is heading for the companies that you help?
Yeah, I think that within 10 years, marketing as we know it will be so fundamentally different in terms of performance marketing. Like everything, unfortunately, AI is going to change up the game. The future will simply be somebody asking, hey, I have a target market for this demographic, for this psychographic. Tell me the best strategy. And AI will do that. 10 years ago, you didn't have that. So when you think in terms of the future, I just think that for companies who already have AI embedded, who have a legitimate corporate brand, and then have the personal brand for people who actually the spokespeople for that, those companies are going to skyrocket. The future of marketing will belong to those companies that know how to capture personal brand, know how to capture the corporate brand, and use AI again as a force multiplier.
I think I'm very curious about that point because at some point of time, when you are building a company, you get this question that how much of this marketing can I attribute to revenue, right? And that's where a lot of time performance marketing, growth marketing word is thrown at without going into the depth of it. And as AI, like you said, makes it very accessible, I don't think of it as a technology per se. I just think of it as a usability that earlier you used to spend a lot of time in preparing the data so that you can get an answer.
Right.
And in a way, you said that today a customer doesn't need to go through the whole project of preparing a data. They can just ask a chatbot, and a large language model would fetch that information from 15 different sources. So in a way, now getting intent signals and all those things are getting easier and easier, right? There's no
Right.
excuse for subpar quality. And that's where some of these brands become nameless. However, my follow-up question is that you think performance marketing is going to get harder, or is it about the more about the quality that works, it needs to be worked harder?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think that people's expectations for what they are getting from a company are going to be through the roof because now AI is basically eliminated average. Everything is exceptional now. If exceptional is the news baseline, then like you said, what's going to have to come beyond that is going to have to be exceptional cubed, if you will. And I just think that what happens is, I heard an Apple interview with Steve Jobs, and he was talking about when there is an increase in high tech, there has to be a proportional increase in high touch. The marketing will be personal, personal, personal. It's going to be because humans, we crave human interaction. We crave the authentic. So as AI, the chatbot, the agent makes everything, people are just going to simply dismiss that. And they're going to look for that, again, that human interaction. So I think that the future belongs to the companies that have the bandwidth, the background, the brand. But at some point, it is that human interaction. I personally think that the role of the influencer is going to be predominant in the future where companies are going to have their own influencers, the corporate influencer, because they're going to need somebody to function to humanize this technology, if you will. So, yeah,
Yeah, I think I mentioned that a couple of times, and I think that's something super interesting because if everybody is using AI, then that's not a differentiator. Then what differentiator is left is that how do you humanize your brand? Eventually, people buy from people, humans buy from human. They might like to get information from AI to make it more accessible and a quick answer. But at the end of the day, you want to trust someone and you want to like someone and hold someone responsible or feel that you went through a buying experience, right? So it becomes important, even more important that, like you mentioned, personal branding or corporate influencers, right? But do you think that the influencers in the future are not just going to be external, but going to be internal influencers as a differentiator?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, we're already creating that strategy for our clients that you have to have a personal brand at this point. Because again, the nameless companies that are constantly popping up literally every day. So when I always give this example, you hiring somebody to come in to be a babysitter for your child. A loves animals, kids, and babies. Client B is just simply to get a check. Obviously, you're going to go for the person who is more invested. And the investing is just the humanizing aspect. So the future of marketing is human. And yeah, well, I would say 2005 versus 2025 we're talking about two different lives, if you will. When we originally started, there was no AI that you actually had to know how to code a website. And if you didn't, you had to actually hire a developer and a UX person. All of that now is kind of out the window. No code, the headless CMS, marketing AI. I mean, because AI can basically do your marketing. AI can basically build your website. AI can basically build a brand at this point. So I would say that is the first thing. Just simply get started. Once you use AI to your advantage, you have to understand that AI is a force multiplier, as you know. And the difference is that your competition will use AI. The biggest advantage for a company like me, a company like Quantum, being in the game so long, is that we have the brand recognition so that now when we use AI, we're just not a newbie using an expert platform to present yourself as an expert. Got to realize because AI is a force multiplier, it brings a level of expertise that you may or may not have. And so I would say
Absolutely.
to get started.
Super. I think I fully agree that AI is a great level setter. You needed 10 different professionals to do what AI can do for you today. I do still think that you're selling yourself short in early days. It's just you that can tell your unique point of view. So for thousands of people in their journey who want to be in your position as a CMO in future, or a chief growth officer, or a chief revenue officer, or a chief marketing officer, they always look at those few like yourself and other people who have made it. What are the couple of tips you would share back when you were not a CMO that helped you get to this path? What advice would you give?
I read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People some years ago. And that has been a very effective book to frame out an approach to how to become successful. And in it, he talks about beginning with the end in mind. And this is so important. In your journey, it's very difficult to go from A to B. It's extremely easy to go from B to A because what you're doing is you're basically reverse engineering your success. So it's a lot easier to envision what you want, to begin with the end in mind. If you're trying to be a chief marketing officer, then go to that place in your mind where you're a chief marketing officer in the future and look at your life, all the things that you are in your mind are hoping to achieve, and just simply reverse engineer that back to the present. I just find that that is perhaps the biggest advice I can give anybody is to begin with the end in mind.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I strongly agree that visualization of who you want to be oftentimes makes you think that if I am a chief marketing officer, then and I'm visible to more chief marketing officer, then I have an influence with a lot of co-founders, chief executive officers, chief financial officer, which means that if today you were to build that visibility and influence, then you would be already on that path because a lot of those people would know you and identify you. Whereas today, hoping for to get there and working hard just internally wouldn't get you there. So I think I totally relate to that. Absolutely. All right. So in the next part, I'm curious to know that we said AI already 25 times in this conversation. I love this analogy because so if AI were to tell you an answer, both are babysitters. You can go with either them, but you just like the personality of the other babysitter better, and that's why you'll go with that. So it's really about building that personality. But from your personal experience, what difference does having a strong personal brand make in a business success? And I ask this especially because a lot of our listeners are in that early stage of product market fit, and they necessarily do not have a Fortune 1000 companies unlimited budget for marketing and performance marketing. They have very shoestring budget of marketing, and they want to get results from that. And in a way, for a long time, founders and the C-level executives in those companies are the one who are selling it. So they are the brand. I'm sure you were in that situation. You help customers in that situation. So what role does a strong personal brand play in that?
I would say that the strong personal brand is going to become the deal breaker in the future. And for the nameless companies that can use AI and produce results, if there's a 10,000 nameless companies, you're going to choose the one that resonates with you. And the typically one that resonates with you has a human touch. What people don't understand is that to build a personal brand simply takes sweat equity. It's just your time. Out of all of our intern students, 80% are just average, 20% are exceptional. What makes the exceptional exceptional? They all are excellent, driven, understanding the power of the personal brand, can humanize content. It's just everything that separates you. So if there's a difference of hiring a product manager and just, again, the thousands of resumes versus that individual who has charisma, they have aura, they have presence, it's the soft skills. The soft skills in a world where everything is tech, 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 the soft skill is going to sell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's one thing that stuck with me recently is that in all my interaction with chief revenue officers specifically, and a thing that's bothering them most is that uh, I remember somebody told me that, look, I am still the one as a co-founder and as a chief revenue officer. We are the two guys who are selling till Series A and Series B. It's just two of us who are selling in every call. whenever a demo was there or an investor conference was there. But we used to sleep. And the problem was that for the 8 hours we slept or ate food, nobody was selling on our behalf because it was just us. And that's where their founder's brand and personal brand was the content that spoke for them 24/7 and in the rooms that they were not there. So which was a phenomenal eye opener for me that for a lot of companies to get to where they have a lot of marketing budget to spend and do a lot of marketing, they really need to build the personal brand so that it's selling for them to help them hit that product market fit and everything. So it completely resonated with me. All right. Few last questions. What's one piece of contrarian advice you'll give to rising tech leaders who will become future chief technology officers, chief revenue officers? They're getting a lot of advice on how to build more AI skills. What have you seen that has come by as a hype versus some of the things that stick and has stuck the ground? So what's your advice?
Another awesome question. I would just stick with the core advice, and that is just you have to get a sense of what the future holds, and then you position yourself as somebody who can provide value. The future belongs to the person, company, team that provides value, solve problems, create value. So whatever you're doing, let that be kind of your lodestar is to solve problems and create value. And that could be done a lot of different ways. To the person who's creative, who's adaptive, you don't need $1 million budget. You don't even need $100,000 budget. You need to be very specific about what you want. You need to live from the end, meaning if you're familiar with Neville Goddard, it's all kind of that mindset. But it's, again, very much the play of beginning with the end or living from the end, meaning you have to envision what you want from life. You have to be very specific about it because I find that you can work very hard and get something and then not really find happiness there. And the reason that you didn't find happiness is you were not specific at the very beginning to go there in your mind and say, what does it feel like to actually be a CMO? What is that stresses? What's a typical day that's a grand day? And what's a typical day that's a horrible day? What does that look like? How does that make me feel? Once I get our students to do this, or even our clients to ask them, what does success look like? And for them to articulate success, and that becomes kind of like my baseline, it's essential for you to live from that initial place because when you live from there and you operating from that, you don't waste time. You're very efficient because you know what you want and you know what you don't want. And you don't waste time in doing activities. Failure is important in this entire, and the ability to fail quickly is super important. Most people, they don't have a load start. And so anything can kind of push them off. Once you have that North Star that guides you and you're living from the end, there's nothing that you can't do.
Super. Yeah. So get your North Star figured out and then be okay to fail, right? And take your shots, right? Awesome. Awesome. Super. I think that was it. Any last word of advice or anything you'd like to share with our listeners?
I would say the time to start was yesterday. And so if you started yesterday, then today definitely the time. Do not put this off because there is a new revolution happening. We talked about AI and AI hype. But the reality is, this is something that could revolutionize every aspect of life. And the flip side is, if you're not in this kind of gold rush, you will be left behind.
That is true. I think there's a sense of urgency, but at the same time, people who are thoughtfully taking limited steps. I just want to make sure that people don't think the world is rushing by and I need to do something. And you end up doing something which is just half-hearted or half-cocked. Because the first step that you said is super important, building your North Star. If you have a North Star, then some of the following things follows from there, right? That I need to just do 3 things right. And it doesn't feel like you're always missing on something. So great advice, Juan. And thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. We'll come back with another great leaders on this.
To catch more such interesting conversations, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Music.